Hello and welcome to another version of this debate show thing that I do here on ThatDudeinBlue. The last episode we did was about cars that didn't deserve the hype. And some of those cars I got to drive in the meantime, and I was like, you know what? Maybe they do deserve some hype. But this time I wanted to go the absolute opposite direction about cars that maybe deserved more credit or more hype. So I put out a tweet, YouTube post, and Facebook post. What is the most underrated sports car of all time? That way we're kind of specific and not just car, because that could go on forever. And man, oh man, there were some answers. So let's go ahead and break them down and show you my opinion on them. Also, before we get started, please leave a like on this video and at the same time leave a comment down below of what your most underrated sports car of all time is, so maybe we can have a follow-up to this one. So without further ado, let's see what you guys said. But first, before we get started with today's video, I just want to give a huge thanks to today's sponsor, Christopher Kloos. Christopher Kloos has an amazing selection of eyewear that is perfect for every occasion. Sunglasses are very important to me with how many road trips I do and how much I travel, and these are the Black Noir model from the Brady collection. And it's almost hard to believe that they offer polarized lenses at this price. I chose this style for the quality feel of the acetate and also just the fitment on my face. It doesn't fall down my nose or slip off the ears or anything like that. The glasses go right on and I'm extremely comfortable. Also, if you need prescription lenses for your frames, they offer that too. So it kind of checks all your boxes. That you get great quality fitment, and if you need prescriptions, you can see. And also just look at the details. The packaging, it's just a quality brand and I absolutely love it. And on top of all that, they have Tom Brady as one of their spokespeople. So I don't really have any doubts that this Danish brand is the future of eyewear. And also impressively, the company does all their main manufacturing through Mazzucchelli and their biodegradable M49 acetate. That means that their collection is Italian made and 100% sustainable. So what's honestly not to love? And Christopher Kloos has unbelievable customer service. They fully understand that frames are a try-on product, which is why they made a pledge from day one to offer worldwide free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges forever. So if you're ready to step up your eyewear, head over to Christopher Kloos and click on the description with my unique code and enjoy 20% off. And thank you to Christopher Kloos for sponsoring today's video. Joseph said the RX-8. Okay, I've been kind of saying this for a while, and the RX-8 handles so good. Out of all the more modern-ish cars out today, when it comes to feeling kind of raw and fun around corners, the RX-8 is pretty hard to beat. It doesn't look like the FD-RX-7, it doesn't have that appeal, but it does drive really good. Revving it pretty much to 9,000 RPM is incredibly satisfying, but the motor was even less reliable than the last gen, which is saying something. And also, most people who own them didn't let it warm up and they would just completely flood the engine. I cannot tell you how many times I heard stories or helped out friends where they would just take their RX-8, park it, pull it, and put it to another parking spot and then just shut it off. And then see you later. It was toast. But I'm not an expert on rotaries, but all I can tell you is that the RX-8, when it did work, was actually a really fun car to drive, and I kind of support this one. The Geo Storm, it really lacked everything. Power, looks, everything. The Lexus LFA. No. Ashley said the '89 Thunderbird Super Coupe with the 3.8 liter supercharged 5-speed. Yeah, you don't really hear anything about the Thunderbird anymore, which is hilarious because if you think about it, the Thunderbird was kind of the original Corvette competitor in a way, and then just how the timeline went out that the Mustang, the pony car, the muscle car, then became a big rival of more of a sports car. The Thunderbirds don't get a lot of credit, and at the same time, I'm in the middle about it. I think the idea of it is super cool. The supercharged 3.8, really unique, really different. So if you're looking to be different out there, completely understand. Skipper said the last Gen Celica and the Hyundai Tiburon. Both don't get enough respect compared to the DC-5 Integra and the RSX. Well, let me tell you why that is. The RSX is a lot better of a car. The RSX to this day is plausibly one of the best first cars somebody could buy. Manual, K-Series, good gas mileage, high revving, good handling, decent interior for being 20 years old. I would 100% recommend the RSX Type S over those two cars, especially the Tiburon. And believe it or not, when I was looking for my first car when I was a teenager, I really looked at the Tiburon. I liked the styling of the Tiburon, and I liked how it kind of had a nice stance to it overall. It looked sporty. It looked really cool. But then, you know, it's front wheel drive, and at the same time, the motor didn't really do much. A friend of mine did a whole bunch of bolt-ons to his, and he still ran like a 16-second quarter mile. I hate to say it, styling-wise, the Tiburon, I think, nailed it for the time, but I just don't really think it's that great of a sports car. However, the last gen Celica, I can defend more against the RSX Type S for sure. It was a high revving, neat engine. It looked very bizarre, but it was a kind of cool car at the time. I agree. Rashab said the NC Miata drove one back-to-back with a nice 350Z and left with loving the NC more. I agree. The NC Miata is probably the most slept on Miata. Yes, it's more big and bubbly, but at the same time, when you have the NA and NB, for the longest time, they are a lot more affordable, even though the NC is a much more drastic change. Speaking of that RX-8, the NC Miata's interior is a lot like the RX-8, and I believe they're on the same chassis. Forgive me if I'm wrong. So the NC Miata, don't sleep on it. I think a lot more people should build those cars. Be honest, how many people forgot the Saturn Sky Redline existed? I think that's a really interesting take, because the Pontiac Solstice, and then you had the Saturn Sky Redline, and also the Saturn Ion Redline, the supercharged one. That was a neat car. It was just a very weird time for GM when they were doing these super parts bin cars, right? Where they were literally carbon copies of each other. Oh, look back at the underrated Saturn Sky Redline. Well, apparently somebody agrees with you. The Saturn Sky, I have to admit, it grew on me over time. If you just de-chromed the whole thing, there's just way too much chrome. The materials weren't very good on the interior. Just the overall build quality wasn't that good. I'm telling you, look at this T-Rex. All I want to do is put the window up. Like, what if you were taller than me? I don't understand. You could definitely tell, like, somebody would love this car. Like, if you got somebody in this car who was a big Miata fan or something, the Miata would probably be the winner, but I still wouldn't sleep on this car because it did have more power. It had a decent Ecotec engine, and it was a manual, and it was a roadster. And nowadays, you could probably get these for nothing. I had driven the Solstice, but I never drove the Sky. So if somebody has a clean Sky that's in the Georgia area, let's do a video together. It'd be fun. The 5th gen Honda Prelude, VTEC, 4-wheel steering, manual, yet is never brought up. The 5th gen Prelude I actually just reviewed. I haven't edited yet, but it will be out soon. But the 5th gen Prelude, I think you can make them look so freaking good. They just had a really nice long side profile to them. You're right, it was heavier, it was front wheel drive, when the car almost gives the aroma that it's rear wheel drive. I always made the argument that if the 5th gen Prelude was rear wheel drive, it would have 100% been an S chassis competitor and maybe a drift missile today. And honestly, when you get in the 5th gen Prelude, it feels good. But since you have the 4th gen, you have the Civics, it's almost like the other cars were too good in comparison. And the 5th gen wasn't a bad car by any means, but the 4th gen, even though the back of it isn't a looker, the front of it's definitely a looker. But yeah, H series, 5th gen Prelude, totally get it. Heavy Chevy says any GM F-body. I disagree. I do not think the F-body is underrated at all. In fact, so many people use the F-body as a drag racer to this day. And a lot of the times I tell people if they're trying to get into drag racing, that is one of the first cars I bring up. Like the WS6 and the Catfish Camaro and all those. LS powered, like, what's underrated about it? Like, do you want everybody to kind of worship it? Because a lot of people already do. And also that Camaro became the, oh, you can't afford the C5 Corvette, so you got this instead. It didn't handle very well in comparison to some of the other cars of the era, especially the Japanese cars of the era. But as a drag racer and power platform, it's a great budget drag car. I disagree with that one. Ooh, speaking of weird hatches, the Caliber SRT4. The first time I ever witnessed one of these was on Woodward Avenue up in Detroit for the Woodward Dream Cruise, and I saw this man hurting some feelings. And the next time I did it was out on track out in Colorado, and I got to really experience the car. the interior was absolute hot garbage. This was like right before Dodge really got their stuff together, in my opinion, especially with their interiors. But no, it was a fun car to drive. It felt very much like the Cobalt SS. And a lot of people don't like me comparing those two, but if you think about it, they're pretty close. They're pretty similar cars. Not looks-wise, but mythos and theory and just their objective of the car. 4-cylinder turbo, domestic Tudor car. So Caliber SRT4, pretty underrated for sure, and you almost never see them. You see the neon SRT4s more, which is crazy. Mitsubishi 3000 GT or Mazda Speed 6. Okay, the Mitsubishi 3000 GT I don't think is underrated. It's just not brought up in conversation a lot because they were so unreliable. They're really cool cars. I have a review of a mint one coming out soon. But the 3000 GT was so ahead of its time, almost in a bad way. 4-way steering, active aero, all of this, and it just broke a lot. And therefore it got this reputation of don't buy that car, it breaks a lot, rather than look at this revolutionary sports car out of Japan and it could out-corner a C4 Corvette with no issue. But the VR4, it's in this weird metal area, but the Speed 6, 100%. The Speed 6 I drove for the first time last year, and I had a great time. It felt very unique, very weird, but once again, very much like the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, it had reliability issues. In a lot of ways, is kind of the granddaddy of the Focus RS. It's an EcoBoost engine, essentially. The block is almost identical. All-wheel drive is similar, and it handled very well. So it was almost like a beta test for things to come. That's why the Speed 6 isn't talked about a lot, because everybody that I know that built really fast ones, they're sitting in a garage somewhere. And I don't mean that out of disrespect. It's just, it's a tough platform to figure out. Jay says, Ford Crown Vic, followed by, that's not a sports car. You mean the Mercury Marauder? The Mercury Marauder is dope. I absolutely had a wonderful time driving it about 2 years ago, and I would recommend riding one if you've never been in it, because it's a ridiculous paradox of a car. It's very comfortable, and sure, the materials aren't the best. It's roomy, and at the same time, it has a really badass V8 in it. I wonder how far you can lean this seat back. Am I going off camera? I don't know yet. How tall people feel. Logan says, Toyota Fiero. Cabell says, dude, the Fiero is awesome, but that was a Pontiac. Both these guys I went to high school with, and I was a very different person back then. So don't judge me, Logan and Cabell. But when I drove one the first time, I understood why they were considered so sketchy. I understand why a lot of people drove that car and said, no, never again. I never want to see this car ever again, because it felt dangerous. It didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel reliable, and they weren't reliable. Not to mention they made pretty much no horsepower. I don't think the Fiero is underrated. I just think it wasn't a great car. I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone say S2000. Probably because it isn't underrated. Yeah, S2000 is a great car. I think most people unanimously agree that it's a pretty great car. 2003 Corolla S. Yeah, the Corolla S is such a, I don't get it. I don't understand what their goal was with that car, because it really wasn't any faster and it wasn't that much better. It was just some minor changes to the normal Corolla. And the Corolla S pretty much might as well have been a normal daily driver Corolla. But that's my opinion. Don't hate me. I'm not saying it's a bad car. I'm just saying there's not much of a difference. Who underrates these? And then Zach says, GM in 2015. So the CTS-V wagon was actually a special order. You, for the most part, would never find them at the dealership. 90% of the time, you would have to go to the dealership and order it yourself, which really hurt the sales of the car. Yeah, we just assume our customers will order these. And they didn't, because they couldn't find them the normal way, back when dealerships were still dominating completely. But the CTS-V wagon, I think it's unanimously agreed that it's a cool car. Ryan says, my picks would be the Infiniti Q60. I've got the VR30, it makes over 500 wheel horsepower with a few bolt-on to tune. I never see them on the road. So I driven the Q50, I haven't driven the Q60, but same power plant, and I drove a 370Z with the VR30 to kind of simulate the new Nissan Z. And honestly, the engine is a good power plant. I like it, the way it comes on, the turbochargers, the bolt-ons making 500 wheel. Yeah, they're great cars, but The issue is what they're up against. The Infiniti is priced in that way where you're in that limbo spot between some German sedans and some American four-door cars. A lot of people ask why the Chevy SS didn't really succeed, and mostly it's because one, it didn't look the part. It was almost too much of a sleeper. They still looked at things like the BMW M3 or the Audi RS3, and they didn't go buy the car that looked like a Malibu. I think that's the same issue with the Infiniti, is that it's its competitors that it's the problem. I don't think it's necessarily a bad car, just the competition. Christopher went all in, 3.7 Mustang, so Cyclone engine, Saturn Sky, Pontiac Solstice, we talked about that earlier, Cobalt SS, and Lexus IS300, and the Lincoln Mark 8. I won't be surprised if the 3.7 turns into a drift missile. You can get them for stupid cheap, and it's 300 horsepower, and parts are easy to find. Now, do you get the same torque as the V8? No, but it's very similar to the way a VQ engine comes on, like the 350Z. So I won't be surprised if that becomes a new drift missile or budget build project. And if you turbocharge them, they can make 500-600 horsepower. It's bananas. All the Vortec ones I've driven made 450 wheel on pump, and that's still impressive on low boost. People do sleep on the 3.7. It's just hard when the Coyote is right there, and the Coyote is such an amazing engine. The Lexus IS300, I think people respect that car. I don't think it's really underrated. It's just that we got the bad one, we got the slow one, and not the cool one. BMW Z4 3-liter, early 2000s. Find them for cheap, rear-wheel drive manual, fun car. Believe it or not, these are turning into drift missiles now too, and that makes perfect sense. Short wheelbase, 3-liter engine with enough horsepower. I remember seeing the Z4 the first time and being like, that's a cool car when I was a kid. And then when I got older, I was like, eh. But the Z4M, that car's sick because it's N54 powered, and that's wild. Jesse says the 300ZX. Okay, the 300ZX, it's not as talked about as much as the Skylines and the Zs, but I think a lot of people, well, okay, when I say Zs, you know what I mean, 350, 370, but I think a lot of people appreciate the 300ZX. It's a good looking car, pretty timeless design, interior is really cool, has these kind of gauge pods on the side that make you feel like you're in a spaceship. 300ZX, I don't think it's underrated. 04 to 06 Pontiac GTO. All right, the reason the Pontiac GTO isn't talked about more is because of the other platforms at the time. And not to mention, since it was a copy and paste from the Holden down in Australia, it basically made GM look lazy, and a lot of people just weren't into that. Oh, cool, like, we have a new GTO, but you just slapped a different badge on it. And it's also a lot heavier than the other cars. It's bigger. The interior has not aged that well. But I will say, when I drove my friend Elle Freeman's back in the day, back in like, oh my God, 2014, it was 700 wheel horsepower, and it wasn't even like the faster one. It was the 5.7 liter. Tons of fun, methanol injection, and it was one of my first high horsepower cars I ever drove. So I have fond memories of the GTO. GTO is pretty good value per dollar right now because of the LS powertrain. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. What is your take? Do you agree? Do you disagree with me? Love to hear from you guys. And at the same time, I upload on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and I will see you guys next time. Take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye. This video is brought to you by Patterson Car Care. Get double of premium original detail product for half the price. Head over to PattersonCarCare.com or go to the link in the description below.